If the New Orleans Saints are going to pull off a massive upset this weekend against the San Francisco 49ers, it's going to be all about the mentals, the three qualities this team must express to get that upset. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media, CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at BetOnline, where they've got more odds, lines, and props than ever before. Go check them out, BetOnline, where the game starts. On today's episode, we're going to dive into some of those BetOnline odds and props over at with our Beignets and Parlays segment. Before we get to that, though, we're going to take a look at the formula for a New Orleans Saints win and why mentality matters in this game. If you caught the crossover Thursday episode yesterday, which was a lot of fun, Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker of Locked On 49ers and I breaking down this matchup, looking at biggest stories, key matchups, things like that, as well as giving our predictions. You know, I'm not super confident about the New Orleans Saints going into this one, but that doesn't mean that they can't win. It doesn't mean that they can't prove me wrong. And certainly we'd all love to see that. Now, I tricked Brian and Eric into joining me by unanimously selecting the San Francisco 49ers. So hoping for a little bit of a jinx here. But if the New Orleans Saints are wanting to get a win, yeah, it's going to come down to what they can do on the field, but it's going to come down to the mentals in this game as well. And I think that there are three qualities that this team must express this weekend if they want to get that dub against the San Francisco 49ers. It would be a big time upset on the road. Now, I'm not here to tell you that it's absolutely going to happen. I'm not here to try to hype you up and make you feel like, yeah, there's no shot that the Saints are going out there and losing up against San Francisco. I'm not about all that. I'm just trying to let you know this is what I think the Saints need to do if they want to get that win. Three qualities over on the mental side of the game: confidence, stubbornness, pride. All of those kind of in the same place, but I'll tell you why the specific differences and nuances matter. Confidence means that they have to come into this game completely convinced with all the conviction in the world that they can win. It has to start there, right? You can't be a team right now that is where they are in terms of their record, going across the country to play against a team that was an absolute buzzsaw on Monday Night Football, that looks red hot right now, but that is also mistake prone, has struggled earlier on in the season, all of that, and feel like, we might win this one, we might not win this one. No, you have to be confident. You have to walk up in there like you know that you own the place, like, you know, Levi Stadium is your second hometown, like his second home stadium. Like you got to get all of that done. I almost said Candlestick Park. That would have been a throwback for some of y'all. So you got to come in with that level of confidence. And the Saints have done a good job of that. I mean, being in the locker room, being around these players, speaking to coaches, speaking to coordinators, speaking to the players, there's no down on their luck kind of look from this New Orleans Saints team. Week in and week out, they believe that they can compete. Week in and week out, there's a sense of urgency, but there's no panic. This team is very confident in themselves. And look, they're getting healthier too. I still don't know if Marshawn Lattimore is going to be out there on the field. We saw him at practice Wednesday and Thursday. Hopefully we'll see him at practice again today. But even if you don't get Marshawn Lattimore back, you have two incredibly confident corners, two corners that really trust their themselves in Paulson Adebo and Alontae Taylor, which are going to help you match up with guys like Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. That's going to be a key matchup those are going to be key matchups for this game for sure. But confidence is still a part of it. Then, you could still get healthier elsewhere. You could still get Marcus Davenport back. You could still get Cam Jordan back. Both of them were back at practice. Alvin Kamara missed with illness on Thursday. Players don't usually miss with illness, depending upon what the illness is. You know how we are nowadays, or what we're up against nowadays. But Mark Ingram was back at practice. He's a big time, culture guy. He's a big time confidence guy. And then, of course, you could get healthier on the offensive line as well with the returns of Andrews Peat, potentially James Hurst, and maybe even a little bit of mix in of Trevor Penning, depending upon how far along he is in his process as well. So confidence can be there. Stubbornness. Pick an identity, stick with it. The Saints did this so well last week. Less than 4 yards per carry on the ground, but they still ran the ball over 20 times. They stuck with it. They didn't even hit 90 rushing yards in that game, but they ran 12 times with Alvin Kamara. They ran 9 times with Taysom Hill. You had a couple of scrambles by Andy Dalton, and then you had the minus 4-yard run by David Johnson, who redeemed himself later with a nice catch in the flats that picked up a first down. Stubbornness. Be stubborn. Run the ball, right? You have to be able to do this in this game. And if that's going to be your identity, mixing Taysom Hill in, making sure that he's a part of the game plan, 17 snaps at quarterback, the most that we have seen so far this season, previous high being 11. We spoke at Pete Carmichael yesterday on Thursday, and he said that going into the game, one of the goals was to make sure that the ball was in Taysom Hill's hands as much as possible. They'll need to do that again against the San Francisco 49ers. That's going to lead to a couple of things that we'll discuss here in a moment as we build the game plan to beat the 49ers, because there's kind of 3 things the Saints need to do to make that happen. And the last thing is pride. This is where Demario Davis really matters. This is where Cam Jordan really matters. Jarvis Landry, who's a bit of a spark plug for this offense. Even Andy Dalton. These guys have to have pride. They have to walk into this game with that confidence. They have to be stubborn in terms of the game plan, which really comes down to the coaching staff and the play calling more than it comes down to the players. But prideful is what this team has to be on the road. Not only do they feel like they can win this game, they must feel like they can't lose that game. And I don't mean that they can't lose it as in if they lose it, bad things will happen. I mean, they have to walk into this game feeling like they cannot lose. They have to have pride, and they have to have that pride for 60 minutes. And we've seen that over and over again from this team. They did it up against the Los Angeles Rams. They did it up against the Las Vegas Raiders, even to an extent against the Pittsburgh Steelers. There never really felt like a big give-up moment like you saw with the Arizona Cardinals last week on Monday Night Football up against the very San Francisco 49ers that the Saints would be taking on. So they can't do what the Cardinals did and give up. That can't happen. They can't do what the Raiders did and give up, right? Have to play with pride and come out of this with a win or a loss, whatever it's going to be, heads held high. Not a moral victory conversation, just simply playing with pride with the intent of coming away with a W. If the Saints have this mentality, if they do these 3 things, it's going to put them at least mentally in a position to where they can win this game. Are they going to be able to do it and execute out on the field? That's the next piece. So what are the 3 things that the Saints need to do in terms of building the game plan and the formula to win up against the San Francisco 49ers? We'll break that down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Before we get to that, today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy, absolutely the way that it should be. It's super simple. All you got to do is pick 2 to 5 players, choose whether or not they're going to come in at more or less than their PrizePicks projection. Get those right, and you can win up to 10 times your entry. And first-time users can get a 100% instant deposit match by simply using the promo code Locked On. So, for instance, this game, Andy Dalton, 215.5 yards passing. You think he's going to come in at more or less? Chris Olave, 60.5 receiving yards. Think he's going to have more or less? Jimmy G, 1.5 passing touchdowns, more or less. You just pick those, you get those right, and you could be swimming in cash here in the holiday season. Christmas is on the way. You know you got to buy them presents. So go check them out, prizepicks.com, or download the PrizePicks app. Use promo code LOCKEDON to get that 100% instant deposit match of up to $100. You put down 100, they'll match 100. You put down 50, they'll match 50. You can get it all done over at prizepicks.com. Promo code Locked On. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks again for making us your first listen of the day every day. The New Orleans Saints will need to get these 3 things done on the field, not just the mentals, but on the field, in order to see a win against the San Francisco 49ers. It'll be a big-time upset. Let's see if they can do it. For your second listen today, don't forget to go and check out Locked On Sports today. Get all the news you need around the wonderful world of sports. Everything you're looking for beyond the scoreboard, behind the scenes with the Locked On local experts. Find it on this app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Number 1 priority for the New Orleans Saints, in my opinion, and really, like, you can kind of move these around. And there are some extras too. Like if I say something that you think like, hey, if the Saints do this, let me know. Drop it in the comments on YouTube or hit me up on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola. But for me, number 1 priority is getting pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo, making him make bad decisions. Jimmy Garoppolo has thrown 4 interceptions this season. Through 3 of them went under pressure. He's thrown 11 touchdowns when he's kept clean, as opposed to only 4 when he's under pressure. So you got to be able to get pressure on him. Now we're talking about, what, 9 or 10 snaps in a game in terms of getting pressures. So it's not going to just be getting pressure, right? That only accounts for maybe a sixth of the offensive snaps, right? Or, well, no, that's not true, because you're looking at the passing snaps, not the entire offensive snaps. So let's say a third, right? If he drops back 30 times, you're looking at probably getting 30. You're looking at probably getting like 33% of the time you're trying to get pressure on him. But that makes a difference, because if you can force the turnovers that come with that, which is something that the Saints haven't really done so far this season, then that will help. A couple of other examples of why this matters. Jimmy Garoppolo, 114 passer rating when kept clean. That drops all the way down to 71.2 when he's under pressure. Completion percentage, 70.7% when he's kept clean. Drops all the way down to 54.1 when he's under pressure. And even the yards per attempt almost cut in half when you get pressure on him. So he's making either quicker decisions to get the ball out for minimal damage, or he's making poor decisions, not being able to complete passes, and potentially even turning the ball over. Those are the things that you're going to have to do against Jimmy Garoppolo. To me, that's your number one priority. Kind of, I'll say partnered with that is something that we've already kind of mentioned, is force a dang turnover. The New Orleans Saints are bottom in the NFL, or near the bottom of the NFL when it comes to turnovers, when it comes to giveaways. They're near the bottom of the NFL, if not actually at the bottom of the NFL now, when it comes to turnover differential as well. They're not forcing turnovers. They're not forcing takeaways. And so that's a big deal for this team if they're able to get that done in this game. Like I mentioned, Jimmy Garoppolo under pressure has thrown 3 times as many interceptions as he has when he is kept clean, a la 1 to 3. He ain't got a lot of interceptions on the season. He's rocking with a 15 to 4 touchdown to interception ratio. So you have to get that on your side. So getting the interceptions is one part of it. Forcing fumbles, raking at the ball, top down punches, peanut punches, all those other things, those are going to be integral as well, because you also know that this San Francisco 49ers team leads the NFL in yards after catch. So they're one of the best teams in terms of plays extended once those receivers who turn into runners, including a guy like George Kittle. And of course, now you also have added threats like Christian McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell on the team. Elijah Mitchell's been there, but he's been dealing with injury and stuff like that. But all of those guys turn into runners once they get the ball in their hands. So you have to be able to make tackles at the catch point. And if they try to fight for other yards, fight for extra yards, make them pay for it by punching the ball out. That becomes a big piece too. So force the turnovers, win the turnover battle for a change. Multiple turnovers. One of my bold predictions is Alontae Taylor, who's been closer and closer and closer every week, that he alone doubles the Saints' interception count in this game by getting 2 picks himself. If he can get that done, then the Saints are in a great place. But obviously, that's not the only way, right? That's a bold prediction for a reason. Finally, control the clock. You got to play keepaway. You got to go back to some old schoolyard approach here. And Taysom Hill helps you do that. Alvin Kamara, if he's not ill, is able to help you do that. Getting Mark Ingram back, he can help you do that. So that becomes the next piece of it. And the other kind of part to that is you got to play a clean game over on the offensive side so that you're not pushing yourself back. The Saints only faced 9? Let me double check. I believe it was only 9 third downs in the game against the Los Angeles Rams. And the reason why that's important is because what it shows you is what their early offensive efficiency was. 11 third downs. So going into the final drive, that kind of 4-minute drive, they had only 9 first downs. And so 9 third downs that they had faced. And they converted a handful of those, 4 of those throughout the game. So the reason why that's important is that if you can find that early success, that early down success, then if you're not getting the third downs, it's just as good as converting third downs. But you just have to convert the third downs when you get to them as well. So you're looking at controlling the clock by running the ball, keeping it on the ground, converting third downs, and even just the early down success. 4 yards on first down, 4 yards on second down is better than no yards on first down, and then 2 yards on a run for whatever reason on second down, because the Saints are running. It was somewhere, last time that I checked before the Rams game, it was like 45% on 2nd and 10 following not picking up yardage on a first down. So that's not a great formula for success there. So those are my 3 things. Get pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo, force some darn turnovers, and then control the clock throughout this game. There are other pieces too. You got to be able to move the ball through the air. We talked about how last week, don't rely on taking shots, but take a shot over the middle when you get it. You can do the same thing against the San Francisco 49ers defense out there. They've got some good corners, but they're dealing with some injuries in the secondary, so try to take advantage of that. And in terms of controlling the clock and running the ball efficiently, they're also dealing with some injuries on the defensive interior. Now, those players on the defensive interior, those next men up, have been playing very well, so it's not the same, but those aren't the starters out there. So if you can get a little bit of a push there in the middle, that will help you there as well. Do those three things, you're in a much better position to go up there and disappoint. And I'm talking about a big time disappointment in this game if you're able to come off with a win. The Saints, 9.5-point underdogs on the road. We're going to talk about that a little bit more and break down those numbers as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints with Beignets and Parlays. Got that coming up for you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at SimpliSafe. SimpliSafe is awesome. And I use it because, traveling so much and all those other things. So if you're somebody that's thought about, trying to find ways to secure your home or even just investing in home security, but you've been putting it off, don't wait any longer because you're going to want to catch up on this. The Locked On Saints listeners are going to be getting the #1 rated SimpliSafe home security system for 50% off. That is their biggest offer of the year. 50. I ain't say 15, y'all. I said 50. 50% off, and you do not want to miss it. In an emergency, 24/7 monitoring agents use the Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence, to validate a threat, make sure that it's real, so that you get the priority response that you deserve. That's 24/7 monitoring service for less than $1 a day, less than half the price of ADT's traditional professionally installed systems. These you can do all on your own. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system that I recommend. Get 50% off of any SimpliSafe system at simplisafe.com/lockedonnfl today. That's their biggest discount of the year. So don't wait. That's simplisafe.com/lockedonnfl because there's no safe like SimpliSafe. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with Beignets and Parlays. New Orleans Saints yet again this season. Road dogs, 9.5-point underdogs against the San Francisco 49ers. Now, of course, they're on the road in this one, so that obviously ends up impacting. Usually kind of the rule of thumb here is that when you're on the road, you're kind of, or when you're at home, you get an extra 3 points, right? So if you're a home team that's favored by 3, it's kind of a pick 'em, but they give you the 3 points because you're the home team. So the Saints just a little bit less than touchdown underdogs going into this one, but then plus the 3 points for being on the road. Like I said, how you want to, go about this from a betting angle, I can give you a couple little things, but really this is about like looking at the trends and what this means for the Saints when they are viewed in this way over the course of the past couple of seasons. That's really what we're going to break down here. But if you want to check everything out, of course, you've got more odds, lines, and props than ever before over at BetOnline, where the game starts. So this is actually the biggest that the New Orleans Saints have been underdogs on the road since a game that you'll all remember, and a game that you'll all remember fondly as well. They were 11.5-point underdogs on the road in Tampa last year against the Bucs when they ended up with a 9-0 shutout victory. And a lot of the things that I mentioned earlier, getting pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo, forcing turnovers, controlling the clock. That was the formula to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa when they were 11.5-point underdogs. So it's not unproven that they could do this. That's majority the same defense if you get some of those key pieces back. Same coach that you had there. And even to an extent, same quarterback, because you're going to see a lot of Taysom Hill in this one. Can't tell you how I know that, but I know that. So the biggest spread that the Saints have faced is underdogs since that game right here, 9.5 on their way to the Bay Area. So far, over the course of the past 2 years, the Saints are 2-3 straight up, meaning they've won 2 games and lost 2 games while being road dogs. It's in the last 2 years. But against the spread, they've been 3-2. So take that for what you will. So the way that I kind of break this down is that you can't fully count the New Orleans Saints out. And even though I've been less than optimistic going into this game, especially after watching the 49ers on Monday Night Football, who are coming off of a short week, right? But they are the home team too, so and they didn't have to travel very far, going to Arizona and then back to San Francisco. They got the easy part of the schedule here. But you can't fully count him out, right? Like I said, even though I've been less than optimistic, doesn't mean that you can fully count him out because they've done this. But I'll tell you this much. This game means a ton for Dennis Allen. I think that it's more likely that Dennis Allen is the head coach in 2023 than anything else. I would consider it a shock if he wasn't. But if he wins this game, 100% chance he's the coach in 2023. Absolutely no doubt about that. So it's a big game for him. And this could have some potential residual effects on coordinators as well, depending upon how this game plays out. Like wins here, a win here has a massive impact. A loss here has a little bit of an impact, right? Like you're not necessarily expected to win this game at 9.5-point underdogs. Couple of quick things to also keep in mind. Chris Olave plus 300 right now, second place for offensive rookie of the year, just behind Seattle Seahawks running back Kenneth Walker the third. That was rude. I was trying to be cute and then I said something that sounded rude. Don't hold me accountable for that. Plus 300 for offensive rookie of the year. Remember, he was plus 1,200 last week, climbed up after a pretty good game. So you're looking for him to hopefully have another good game here against the San Francisco 49ers and maybe climb that a little bit higher. And the Saints win total, which is currently set at 6.5, you can find minus 130 odds on the under, plus 100 odds on the over. So if the Saints win total is 6.5, that would mean that 7 would hit the over, 6 would hit the under. So even if you're not looking at betting, that gives you an idea of where Vegas thinks the Saints will end this season. So according to Vegas, they won't win more than 2 more games. Saints currently at 4-7. They've got the San Francisco 49ers, then they're back on the road against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You've got the Atlanta Falcons at home, Cleveland Browns on the road, Philadelphia Eagles on the road, and then Carolina Panthers at home. If you think they can win 3 of those games, you're taking the over on the 6.5. If you think they're only going to win 2 of those games, you're taking the under on the 6.5. That easy. But when I look at this, it's a little bit tough. A little bit tough. I'm going to say that the Saints do win 3 games before the end of the season. I think that they've got good matchups against the Atlanta Falcons, good matchup against the Carolina Panthers, could potentially have a good matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as well. And depending upon what the seeding looks like in the NFC for the Philadelphia Eagles, if they don't have much to play for in terms of seeding, then they could potentially be resting a bunch of starters week 17. That could work out really well for the New Orleans Saints as well. All right, y'all. I appreciate you as always for coming through and joining us for another episode of Locked On Saints. Don't forget, we'll have your live postcast right after the game on Sunday. I'm not traveling to the game, so I'll probably be doing a little bit of extra programming around this one as well. So just keep an eye out on the Twitter page at Ross Jacksonola, as well as, of course, on the YouTube page and the podcast feed for any additional materials that I might be able to release this weekend. Appreciate you as always for coming through and making us a part of your day and making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, make sure you're going to check out Locked On Sports today. Get everything you need to know from the biggest stories, biggest takeaways, take of the day, everything that you're looking for over on the Locked On Sports Today podcast, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much for making me a part of your day, part of your routine, saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, Nola. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.